Hi everyone, welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith. In this video, we're going to learn the 2 to 4 player game Arcadia Quest by Cool Mini or Not and Spaghetti Western Games. Now there was a time when the world was at relative peace. The elves and the orcs, they lived in their own separate lands and didn't bother each other. Then the humans showed up and everything got jumbled and fell to pieces. The humans took up their residence in the great city of Arcadia that they built, and they held their reign there for many, many years, until Lord Fang raised some forces against them, ousted them from Arcadia, and now the dispersed humans and their various guilds are fighting Lord Fang and each other in order to take back Arcadia and claim the glory for themselves. So join me at the table and let's learn how to play. To set up, first, each player picks one of the differently colored guild dashboards and then collects the matching guild tokens and stands for their color. In this example, we'll set up for a 2-player game, returning those unused pieces to the box. Now the players amongst themselves choose 3 of these heroes to fight for their guild during the game. Alternatively, you can shuffle all of the heroes into a face-down deck and then divide it based on the number of players into separate stacks. It's okay if not all of the stacks are exactly equal. Each player then takes one, secretly picks one of the heroes they'd like to keep for their guild and puts it face down in front of themselves, passing the rest of the heroes to the player on their left. Then you look through the cards that you've been passed, pick another hero, and pass the remaining cards once again to the player on your left. And you'll keep doing this until eventually you have 3 heroes in front of you that will form your guild. You then place your chosen heroes on the hero spaces of your guild dashboard. The order that you place them in doesn't matter. Each hero also has a matching miniature which you collect and then attach one of your guild bases to. Each player now collects their own set of the 5 unique starting items that are found in the starter deck. And you can distribute these amongst your heroes. You'll notice that each hero has space for 4 items at most that they can carry underneath each of their hero cards. So I could give 4 items all to one of my characters, which might leave these guys a little short-handed. So I think I'll distribute them instead like so. Aside from the quantity of things a hero can hold, there are no restrictions. Any hero can use any kind of item. I would like to mention that in order to facilitate moving things around on the table for the sake of this video, I'm going to be putting tokens in their own separate containers. These are not supplied with the game, I've provided these myself. Now, although you can play Arcadia Quest as a single scenario, the intention is that you play several of them that come together to form a campaign. And as you complete each scenario, your heroes are going to be gathering treasure and able to buy much better equipment than what they start out with. This is the campaign book. It contains all the different scenarios. And on the back, there's a map of Arcadia. And this shows you all the scenarios and how you progress through them. There are 6 scenarios that take place in the outer circle of Arcadia. After completing 3 of these, you then move to the inner circle and complete 2 of these 4. And then finally, in your 6th scenario of the campaign, you face Lord Fang in the Temple of Dawning Twilight. We'll talk more about the campaign system later, but at the beginning, players simply choose one of these 6 outer circle scenarios to begin with. We'll set up the Rookery. Now we turn in the campaign book to the scenario that we've chosen. On the right side, you're going to find a list of all the components that you need to set up the scenario and what it should look like when you're ready to start. We'll begin with the tiles. Down here is a little legend showing you exactly which tiles you need. For example, in the top left-hand corner, it tells us that we need tile 7A. All of the floor tiles in the game have a unique number and an A and B side. So find the tiles you need, put them on the right side, and orient them as shown in the picture in the campaign book. So this is how things should look for our scenario. Now let's look at placing some doors. Doors have both a closed and an open side. They also come in 2 different sizes, as we see here. Looking at the scenario, we need a closed door in this spot and then an open door in this position. Different sized doors aren't treated differently during the gameplay. It's just so that when they're placed next to each other, they fit together nicely. A large door in this position would then be pushing this door out into the rest of the tile. These are the symbols for portals. Now pay attention to the portal tokens because they have 2 different sides. Make sure you place them the right side up as shown in the scenario. These are quest tokens and you'll place them in the indicated spaces as well. These are exploration tokens. Make sure they're all flipped upside down, then mix them up and randomly place them on the board in the indicated spaces, returning any unused ones back to the box. We're going to do something very similar with the spawn tokens. First, flip them all face down, mix them up, and then place them in the indicated spaces as shown in the scenario. Any unused spawn tokens are then returned to the box, and once placed, the tokens can then be flipped face up. Now we need to collect the monster cards for each of the monster types shown in the scenario. Each monster has 4 different versions to match with the scenario that you're playing. For example, if this is your first scenario in the campaign, use the first level version. If it's your 3rd scenario, then go with the level 2-3 version of the monster. You want to place the monster cards in plain view of all of the players and then put out their figures on the board as shown in the scenario. It tells us to put these special bases on the orc captains, and although the captains have a different figure from the marauders, this does help us distinguish them a little easier, which is very helpful. There are 2 different types of quest cards, PvE and PvP. Each scenario will require some of each. In this case, we need Rescue the Eagles and Kill Hammer Beastman. Some quests, like Kill Hammer Beastman, will also provide you with rewards that come from this deck. In this case, we needed 2 of the Beastman spears, which I will put underneath of the Beastman quest card. And then you take the PvP quests that match the guilds being used by the players in the game. This is the spawn tile. You want to place that near the board, and in a common area make piles for wound, death, and coin tokens, as well as your attack and defense dice. Then take a guild token from each of the players, mix them up so that you can then randomly place 1 in each of the start areas. Only use areas that correspond to the number of players. So in a 2-player game like this, we're only using starting area 1 and 2 as shown in the scenario. Respecting the limit that at most 2 characters can occupy 1 space, players now put their heroes in their starting area in any way that they see fit. Once the heroes are placed, you can then return the guild tokens to the supplies. If this is the first scenario of a new campaign, randomly choose the starting player. Otherwise, the player seated to the left of the player who won the last scenario will go first. I should mention that you can also find a story element to give you some background to the scenario, as well as title rewards that can aid you in future scenarios and any special rules related to the quest. We'll discuss the campaign system in more detail later, but I'll leave this content for you to discover on your own. And that's the setup. In Arcadia Quest, players take turns in clockwise order, usually activating one of their heroes to go out and fight monsters, fight the other guilds, and try to complete these quests. As soon as a guild has completed 3 of the quests for themselves, as long as one of them is a PvE quest, they end the scenario and win. In a 2-player game, as long as a guild has completed any 2 of the quests, they win the scenario. On your turn, you're going to be doing one of 2 things, either activating a single hero or resting your entire guild. Let's start by learning what happens when you activate a hero. First, you pick one of your heroes, as long as it's not dead. You can even choose the same hero turn after turn, but whichever one you choose is now considered active and may perform its movement and 1 attack. Now you can do this in either order, move and then attack, or attack and then move, or just do one and not the other. But you can't start moving, then stop and attack, and then continue moving again. Because each hero has 3 movement points that they can use to move spaces, open and close doors, or use portals. Let's take a look at how moving works. Spaces on the board are these large squares. Now you can never move diagonally, or through a wall, which are these gray hatched borders, or through a closed door. But otherwise, using a movement point to move a space is as simple as that. Each space, at most, can contain 2 characters, and such a space is considered full. A space with 2 enemy characters, relative to the active hero, is also considered full and blocked, and you can't move through a blocked space. So that means our blue guild members here are kind of jammed up. They've got walls on either side and a blocked space in front of them. And it's not just monsters that can block spaces. Members of other guilds are also considered enemies. So the blue guild here is still stuck. However, if a space is full, but one of the characters is from your guild, then it's no longer considered blocked. And as long as you have enough movement points to spend, you can move through the space as long as you end up in a free space. For example, Spike here could use 2 movement points to go here and then here. And if a space has only one character in it, you can move through that space or even enter that space yourself. If you are on a space with a portal, then you can spend a movement point to immediately go to any other space that also has a portal token of the same color. If the space you'd like to teleport to is blocked by enemy characters, then you can't go there. However, if it's just full and one of the characters is from your guild, you can spend a movement point to teleport, but you need to have enough movement points left over to keep moving and get to a space that's not full. To open or close a door, it must be on the full edge of the space where your active hero is located. So Johan here could not open this door. First, he'd have to spend a movement point to go here, and then an additional movement point to flip the door from closed to open. A door is closed in the exact same way. You just spend a movement point and flip the tile back over. It's probably worth noting that aside from the walls and tokens on the board, everything else is just a graphical element and doesn't have an impact on the gameplay. Scattered throughout the dungeon are exploration tokens. Anytime you enter a space with it and there are no enemies on that space, you flip the token over and then add it to that hero's card that moved into the space. If an enemy is in the space with the exploration token, then the token will stay there until the enemy is removed. If able, you must always pick up exploration tokens, but it doesn't cost you any movement points to do so. Now, let's learn how to attack. To attack, the active hero chooses one of its unexhausted attack cards. At the start of the game, none of your cards are exhausted, so Grom here could use either the Rusty Blade or the Slingshot. Now you need to confirm if you can reach your target. There are 2 basic types of weapons that will affect this: melee and ranged, which are represented by these symbols respectively. A ranged attack can target enemies on any space, no matter the distance, so long as the active hero has line of sight to it. To check line of sight, draw an imaginary line from the central dot of the active character's space to the center dot of the target character's space. As long as this line is not interrupted by a wall, closed door, or blocked space, then you can attack your chosen target with a ranged weapon. So, Grom could target this Orc Marauder. However, if these 2 enemies were together, this space is not just full, it's blocked. So the Orc Marauder cannot be targeted. On the other hand, if the space is just full, in other words, there's a friendly guild character in it as well, the space is no longer a blocking one. So this Orc Marauder can be targeted once again. Any space that doesn't have one of those central dots is always considered a blocking space. And depending on the scenario, you may have a layout where there's some empty table area between 2 target spaces. Empty table is always considered a blocking space as well, both to movement and to line of sight. Let's use Grom to again quickly look at a couple more examples of line of sight just to make sure we get this. So Grom can't attack the Hammer Beastman because the line of sight would go through this wall. Same with this Orc Marauder here, the line would hit this wall. However, he could target this Goblin Archer or even this blue guild member all the way back here. And if your line of sight only skims the corner of a blocking element at a 45-degree angle, it's not considered blocked. So if Grom wanted to target this Orc Captain, the line would go like this, just skim the corner at 45 degrees and then continue to the central dot here. However, if there are blocking elements on both sides of the intersection, let's say for a moment we had a monster here and here, this is now a blocked space. So at this intersection we have a blocking element on this side and on this side. Now Grom would not be able to target the Orc Captain. To target an enemy with a melee weapon, you don't have to worry about line of sight, but the target needs to be in what is called a close space. Close spaces include the space you are in and each adjacent one excluding diagonals and any that are blocked by a wall or closed door. So let's use Grom again for an example. He can target the Orc Captain with a melee attack because it's adjacent. He could also target it if it was in his space. But he cannot target this Goblin Archer because it's at a diagonal, or this Goblin Archer because it's on the other side of a wall, or this blue guild member because it's too far away. Once you've confirmed your target, exhaust your chosen attack card by placing a guild token on it. You may not attack again with this card until it becomes unexhausted, which we'll explain later. But what this means is that while you can activate the same hero over and over again to move around, if you want to attack, you're limited to the number of unexhausted weapons that you have. In this case, no more attacking for Grom. Now the attacker collects a number of black attack dice equal to the number shown here, and you may receive bonus dice based on other cards in your inventory or the abilities of your hero, so collect those if required. The target of the attack now does the same thing, collecting defense dice equal to the value shown here. So for example, if Grom was attacking Johan, he would get 3 defense dice. When you're defending, you're not choosing a weapon, you just always have access to this defense. But again, if the defender has any equipment or special abilities that grant additional defense dice, they should add that to their pool. And it's important to note that extra defense icons like this always add to a hero's pool, even if they are located on an item that was exhausted previously, maybe because they attacked with it. You'll notice looking at most monster cards, they don't get any defense dice when they're attacked, unless they're some of the tougher ones, in which case it will be indicated right here. Now players roll their dice. Each sword counts as a hit if the attacker was using a melee weapon, and bows count as hits for ranged weapons. This is a crit. It counts as a hit for either type of attack. But for each crit you roll, you get to roll an additional die. So then if you roll another crit, you get to roll an additional die, which if you roll another crit, it counts as a hit, and you get to roll another die. You get the idea. You keep rolling until you stop rolling crits. This exploding effect could allow you to string together a massive hit. If Grom was using a melee weapon in his attack, then he would have a total of 5 hits here. Now, on defense dice, a blank side does nothing, but a shield counts as a save. You can also roll crits on a defense die. That counts as a save and it allows you to roll an additional defense die. And again, you keep rolling new dice until you stop rolling crits. Something to keep in mind though is that each die only has one side that shows the crit symbol. After the dice have been rolled, it's time to compare results. Since blank defense die do nothing, we'll just remove it. But every save cancels 1 hit. If there are any hits remaining, those count as wounds that you assign to your target with wound tokens. For each unblocked hit, you're going to be able to assign damage in the form of these heart wound tokens. If you are targeting a hero, then place the wounds directly on the hero's card. If you are attacking a monster, then place the wounds right beside that figure's base, and as the monster moves around, make sure the wounds travel with them. But now that you understand many of the concepts related to the gameplay, let's take a quick moment and do a tour of the hero and monster cards. A hero has a name, the number of dice it gets for its defense pool when attacked, and a life total, which is the number of wounds it can take before dying. It also has a natural ability that's listed here, and this is always active following the perimeters of the descriptive text. For example, as soon as Grom takes at least 1 wound, he will always roll 1 extra die when making die rolls. Monster cards show their name and tier. We'll talk about monster tiers later. They have a life total, which is how many wounds they can take before dying, and an overkill rating, which we'll also discuss soon. If they have defense dice, they'll be listed here. This symbol shows the rewards you collect when you kill this type of monster. This is the number of movement points they have available and the type of attack they can do, along with how many dice they can roll. And if they have a special ability, it's listed here. And finally, as mentioned, the level of the monsters you are using in a scenario should match the number of the scenario being played in the campaign. Level 1 monsters are used in your first scenario. Items you collect will have information as well, showing you what kind of attack they can perform, dice they provide, and any special abilities that they have. The timing of special abilities is important, so if 2 would seem to trigger at the same time, the controlling player determines the order in which they resolve. And if your attack targets more than 1 character, you only roll your attack pool once, but of course each defender gets to roll their defense separately. And if you are targeting multiple characters and they each have abilities that could change the number of dice you get to roll as the attacker, only the primary target of your attack changes your die pool. When a character suffers a number of wounds, equal to its life, it is killed. Regardless of how many players contributed to a hero or monster's death, it's the hero landing the killing blow that gets the credit. When you kill a monster, you immediately collect the number of coins shown here. Coins aren't carried by a specific hero, so if you want, you can just place them beside your guild sheet. Anytime a player uses one of their heroes to kill another player's hero, they always collect 1 coin. And if a monster or some other game effect, like a trap, kills a guild hero, then all of the other guilds collect 1 coin. Dead heroes are placed on their hero card, and any exploration tokens they were carrying are immediately placed in the space where they died. With one exception, if they were killed by another hero, the attacker may immediately collect one of the exploration tokens and give it to the killing hero. And that's true even if the attacker used a ranged weapon and killed them from several spaces away. And finally, each time a hero is killed, no matter what the cause, you give them a death token. Whenever a monster is killed, you place its figure on the first available spot on the spawn tile. Okay, now we're getting a sense of how heroes run around, fight monsters, fight other heroes, collect treasures and coins. But what about the monsters? Do they just sit there as punching bags? No, but they don't get their own separate turn. Instead, they respond to what the heroes are doing in one of 2 ways, through guard or payback reactions. A guard reaction is triggered anytime a hero would move to a space from a close space relative to a monster. In the case of our orc captain, just like heroes, its close spaces are the one it's on, and each adjacent space not including diagonals. So when Spike moves here, a guard reaction from the orc captain is not triggered, because Spike didn't start in a close space. However, if Spike wanted to move to this space, then a guard reaction would happen. Even if you're moving towards a monster, let's say Spike wanted to charge into this space, a guard reaction still resolves first. However, opening doors or using portals does not trigger guard reactions. And if a special effect causes a figure to be placed in a specific space, that doesn't trigger reactions either, because that's not counted as a move. It's possible you might trigger several guard reactions at once. Now, if Spike was to move in this direction, he's triggering guard reactions from both the orc captain and the orc marauder. Regardless, when a guard reaction is triggered, all monsters the hero was close to resolve a single attack against the active hero, and these attacks are rolled by the player seated to the right of the active player. Keep in mind, the monsters don't move, they just attack. So when a guard reaction is triggered, each guard reacting monster gets to make a single attack against the hero. Those attacks are resolved by the player seated to the right of the active player. They'll refer to the monster's card, see how many attack dice they should get to roll, and then roll them. The hero, of course, gets to roll defense as usual, and once the guard reactions have been resolved, the hero completes their move as intended. So just to clarify the timing, let's say Spike wanted to move to this space. First, the player to the right of Spike's controlling player would get to do guard reactions for both of these monsters, and they could decide the order in which they wanted to resolve them. Once those guard reactions are completed, and assuming Spike is still alive, Spike could then move to the space that he intended to go to. A guard reaction is also triggered after a hero performs an attack that does not target any of the monsters close to him. So in this case, as long as Spike targets one of these close monsters, none of them will do a guard reaction. However, if he targets this monster over here, well, these 2 monsters will get insulted. Hey, we're a threat, you can't ignore us. And they'll each get to do a guard reaction. Unlike when moves provoke a guard reaction, you fully complete your attack and then resolve the reactions. Payback reactions are triggered whenever you attack a monster, even if the attack doesn't cause any damage. Let's say Greensleeves here attacks this orc marauder. The difference with this kind of reaction is that the monster may first use its movement points before the attack. And it's the player, again, to the right of the active player who decides how to use this movement. In the case of the orc marauder, we see here that it has 1 movement point. The moving monster may use portals, open doors, and go in any direction the controlling player chooses. They may even decide to have the monster move farther away, or not move at all. But if they do wish to have the monster attack, it must be against the hero that caused the payback reaction. This monster couldn't attack Johan instead, for example. If a hero's attack targeted more than one monster, only one will get a payback reaction. Monsters follow the same rules for movement and attacking as heroes do, except monsters never exhaust. And if your attack targets more than one monster, only one of them will get a payback reaction, and again, it's the player seated to your right that gets to decide which of those monsters will get that reaction. You may remember monsters, along with a life total, also have an overkill value. If a hero's single attack does damage at least as much as the overkill value, the monster wasn't just killed, it was overkilled, and that means it won't be able to perform a payback reaction. Now, it doesn't matter if the monster already had some damage on it. You still must do the full overkill value in a single attack in order to prevent the payback reaction. Now let's discuss the monster tiers that I mentioned earlier. Monsters are either minor or major minions or minor or major villains. Remember, normally when you kill a monster, only the player who landed the killing blow gets the gold associated with that monster. However, villains are tougher. And when a player wounds a villain, either minor or major, even if they didn't kill it, they place a guild token on its card. If that villain is eventually killed, all guilds that have a token on the card win the full coin reward that's listed. The credit for killing the villain still goes to the player who landed the killing blow, which may have an impact on completing certain quests. Another distinction is that villains, when killed, are removed from the game. They don't go to the spawn tile. Speaking of which, if the spawn tile is ever filled, or there are no monsters left on the board, then as soon as the active player finishes their turn, they need to spawn more monsters. Starting with the monster in the first space, you roll 2 attack dice. Then you find the spawn token that matches what was rolled and place the monster in that space. The order of the dice doesn't matter. You continue rolling 2 attack dice for each monster on the spawn tile. If you roll a result that doesn't match one of the spawn tokens, then the monster, instead of being placed, is removed from the game. Or if the tile is full that they would spawn to, they're also removed from the game. Also, if you ever have a spawn tile that is full and another monster is killed so there's no room for them, they're also removed from the game. This could happen if you had 1 space left and 2 monsters were killed at once. You'd place one of them on the tile and the other one would get removed. Now, rather than activating one of your heroes on your turn, you can forgo that and instead rest your guild. Now that means your heroes will be stationary for a turn, but this is still very useful because the first thing you get to do is remove all the exhaustion tokens on your dashboard. So if you've been running your heroes around and you're attacking everything, many of them, maybe all of them, can no longer attack. Well, that's going to freshen them up so they can get back into the fray. Also, you then get to rearrange all of your cards and tokens that you have in your inventory, even across characters, regardless of where they are on the board. Now, there are a couple of exceptions here. If you've picked up any quest tokens, those have to stay with the character that picked them up. Quest tokens are different than the normal exploration tokens, because remember, quest tokens are face up on the board at the beginning of the scenario, and they relate generally to the quest cards. Exploration tokens you can swap however you want. Death tokens have to stay with the character that earned them, along with wound tokens. And Death Curse cards, which we haven't seen yet but we'll look at a little bit later, those also have to stay with the character that received them. The third thing you get to do when you rest is resurrect all of your dead heroes. Resurrected heroes return to the game at full health, so make sure you've returned any wounds they had to the supply. Then place the hero figure either in one of the starting spaces or in a close space of one of your heroes that was already on the board at the beginning of your turn. Placing a hero in this way does not trigger guard reactions. Okay, so now we know how heroes run around and fight monsters and other heroes. We know how monsters fight back. We know how to rest and bring back our dead heroes. Why are we doing this again? Right, for the quests. Each scenario is going to have you lay out a certain number of quests that the players are trying to complete. As soon as a player completes any 3 quests for their guild, as long as one of them is a PvE quest, then they end the scenario and win it. And remember, in a two-player game, like we have set up here, the player who completes any two of the quests ends the scenario and wins. As soon as a player completes a quest, they put one of their guild tokens on it. Although each player can only complete each quest once, several players can complete the same quest. But there is a bonus for completing the quest first, and that's shown here. So the first guild to rescue the eagles would collect a single coin. Sometimes a quest will have reward cards associated with them, in which case when a player completes that quest, they collect one of the rewards. In this case, it's a Beastman spear, and they can assign that to one of the characters and put it in their inventory. It is possible that all the rewards will have been collected before you get around to completing the quest. You won't get a reward, but it still counts as one of the quests of the 3 that you need. Also, at the end of a scenario, each guild that completed a quest will get 1 coin, and that's shown here. So in this case, blue would receive 2 coins at the end of the scenario, and orange would receive 1. And while we're talking about collecting coins, at the end of the scenario, if you've collected any treasure exploration tokens, you trade them in and collect a number of coins as indicated on the treasure chest. Once the scenario is over, before you put everything away, you need to complete the upgrade phase. You start this by removing any death curse cards on any of the heroes. Now wait a minute, I haven't even told you about what these death curse cards are. And that's because if you're going to receive them, you get them at the end of a scenario, so during the first scenario of a campaign, no one's going to have these. But if it's the second or later scenario, you might have some, in which case you return them to the Death Curse deck. Then you shuffle this deck up because now it's time to hand some out. So you were running around attacking heroes and monsters and you were dying left and right, but you didn't care because every time you rested, you came back to life. Well, now it's time to pay for your recklessness because each time you die, you collect one of these death tokens. And now you're going to have to draw a death curse card for each death token on each hero. So Johan has drawn a nosebleed and a severe nosebleed. The good news is you only have to keep one of the death curse cards. The bad news is you have to take the worst one. And that's indicated by the value here. So you keep the highest valued one and discard the other. Now normally a death curse card just goes beside your hero and then it has an ongoing negative effect. In this case it says -1 health. So Johan can only take 2 wounds now before dying. However, this death curse says it occupies a card slot. So now we have to put this in our inventory and use up one of the spaces. Now if all of your spaces have items in them, you can place a death curse on top of an item. You don't lose the item, but you won't be able to use the item until the death curse is removed, normally at the end of the next scenario. In the case of Spike here, we have to draw 3 of these death curses. Hey, not so bad, no curse. Hey, another no curse, maybe he's going to get off unscathed. Nope, there's amnesia. This one doesn't take up a card slot, but it says that the character will now lose its natural ability. That's the ability listed here on the hero's card. Once the death curses have been handed out, it's time for some good news. First of all, we can remove all of the death tokens on all of the heroes and return them to the supply. And now the players get to use the coins that they've collected to buy new equipment and new items for their heroes. So far we've been adventuring with rusty blades and slingshots. Let's see if we can find something a little better. Now remember, each campaign is comprised of 6 different scenarios. And at the end of each scenario, you're going to take the upgrade deck that matches in level number the scenario that you just completed. So at the end of the 4th scenario, you'd take the level 4 deck. At the end of the 1st scenario, you'd take the level 1 deck. You'll shuffle this deck and then deal 6 cards to each player. The players look at the 6 cards they've been given and then pick 2 of the cards that they want to keep, or keep from the other players. They take those 2 and they put them face down in front of themselves, passing the rest to their left. You'll of course receive 4 new ones from your right. You'll take them, pick 2 of those to put face down in front of you. You'll then pass the remaining 2 that you have. You'll receive 2, and those will be the final 6 that you get to purchase items from. Using the coins you collected from the previous scenario, you can now, at most, purchase 3 of the items in your hand. Their cost is located here in the top left-hand corner. After you're done spending, you can save 1 leftover coin, but all the rest that's unspent gets returned to the supply. Looking at these options, I think I'm going to pick up the Bleeder for 2, the Trusty Blade for 1, and the Orc Pelt for 5. That does leave me with 1 coin. I'm going to get to save that and perhaps use at the end of the next scenario. Any unpurchased items are just discarded. Now you can assign your new items to your heroes and rearrange all of the old ones. Now, amongst all your heroes, at most, they can carry 12 items. So if you ever have more than 12 items, you're going to have to pick some to get rid of, and you lose them permanently. After that, you then remove all of the wounds from any of your heroes that might remain and put them in the supply, and any unused exploration tokens. Those are also removed. The player who won the scenario gets to pick the next scenario that will be played. And that's how you play Arcadia Quest. Now, there are some exploration token symbols and game effects caused by upgrade card abilities that we haven't talked about. But there's a page in the rulebook that quickly covers them, and in our follow-up playthrough, you'll probably see some of these as well. The game also comes with several campaign sheets, and you use this to keep track of your progress throughout the campaign. First of all, you put X's beside the scenarios that you've completed, and then you fill in beside each scenario the names of the players who won the scenario overall, had the least deaths, the most coins, who won a reward or won a title. Some of the scenarios have titles that you can win when you complete a quest. The winners of titles are recorded down here, and those titles will give you slight advantages in future scenarios. At the end of the campaign, you'll check and see whose name was written most in each column, and then record their name in the final space. Each time your name appears in this bottom row, you gain a medal. If there's ever ties, then the tied guilds both get the medal. The amount of medals each guild won determines how much prestige it has in the retaken city. And the victory of the guild that won the final showdown is qualified by how many medals it got. So while winning the final scenario means that you won the campaign, you can judge just how good that victory was. If you only have 0 or 1 medals, it's a hollow victory. Or 2 to 3 means it was a decisive one, but you'd really like to have 4 or 5 medals for ultimate victory. On the other side of your campaign sheet is a space to record all the information at the end of a scenario. So you can put the guild member's name, the heroes they have, the equipment that they're carrying, death curses they have, and if they saved a coin at the end of the scenario. Each of the items in the game has a code at the bottom, so you can just record that code in the appropriate space. That way, after packing the game away, when you're ready to continue the campaign, you can pull the cards out that you need and set everything up as it was. And if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to put them in the comments below, and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. And check the description of this video first, because any common questions I'll put there with the answer. I do hope you'll consider subscribing to our channel, because in future episodes, we're going to do a full playthrough of an Arcadia Quest scenario, so you can see exactly how the game works and participate in the gameplay. But until the next episode, thanks for watching.